Chapter 53, Troubled Cities. There have been enormous changes in the 2 decades since the end of World War II. Martin Luther King Jr. could look at the South with some satisfaction. Where segregation has once flourished, or to grow and thrive, blacks and whites now work together, voted together, went to school together, ate in restaurants together, and rode on buses together. The changes were amazing to those who knew the Old South. The new racial harmony had helped bring industry and a progressive spirit to the South. The region was thriving. But when King decided to take his movement north into big city ghettos, he discovered problems that were tougher than any he had faced before. He had believed that the methods that worked in the South would work in other regions too, but the situation was different in America's northern cities. In the South, the problem had been Jim Crow laws and police-enforced segregation. The solution was to get the laws changed and to get the police to enforce those laws. The job wasn't finished, but the laws were in place and the direction was clear. There were no Jim Crow laws in the North or West. The urban nightmare had nothing to do with the laws. The problem there was economic. The cities were filled with poor people, black, white, brown, who weren't being given a chance to rise out of poverty. Usually they went to schools that were tattered and poor, where they didn't get good training for the new kind of jobs that technology was bringing. But there were hardly any jobs in the inner cities anyway. Many city people were almost without hope. Young blacks in cities were full of frustration and rage. And urban whites? When King marched in the Chicago area, he was met with white hatred more vicious than anything he encountered in Mississippi or Alabama. Many of the city's whites were poor too. They were competing with blacks for jobs, and there weren't enough jobs to go around. Instead of coming together, black people and white people seemed to be growing further and further apart. Some leaders on both sides were encouraging hatred. President Johnson still hadn't found a way to get out of Vietnam. He was putting pressure on those like Martin Luther King Jr. who protested against the war. It was a tough time for King. John Kennedy's brother, Robert Bobby Kennedy, was telling him he needed to bring his battle for justice north. Kennedy said the same thing to the ministers and the others who had gone south. Martin Luther King Jr. decided to begin a new campaign. It would be a campaign against poverty. King's program was aimed at all the poor, including the 2/3 of them who are white. Poverty was not just a black problem or a white problem. It was a national disgrace. King planned to bring poor people to Washington. This would not be a one-day march. They would stay. They would camp in the city. The government leaders would have to pay attention. King believed that eliminating poverty made economic sense and was the right thing to do. If you turn the poor into purchasers, King said, they will solve many of their own problems. The vast amounts of money that the nation spent on military goods could be used to make life better for all people. Poverty has no justification in our age, he said. War is obsolete. He believed that nonviolence was the way nations must learn to solve their differences. But time was running out for King and his nonviolent ideas. King talked over his problems with Bobby Kennedy. So did Cesar Chavez. Kennedy really seemed to care about poor people. Few other politicians did. The senator was now on the campaign trail attempting to win the Democratic nomination for president. It looked as if he might do it. You can pause the video and read through the civil rights for Native Americans on your own.